of your parliamentary colleagues, Philip Lee, about an hour ago, and he says there's no way that the Liberal Democrats would ever support this kind of deal. But if you're so adamant that no deal is such a terrible idea, surely it's incumbent on you to at least give consideration to supporting this deal.
Well, the Liberal Democrats firmly believe that there is no Brexit deal that will benefit the UK and particularly our economy. And you mentioned no deal there. Well, the deal that Boris Johnson has secured in principle is basically no deal in all but name in terms of the economic consequences.
It absolutely is not. That is an absolute lie.
In terms of the economic consequences, it is, because we will still have massive disruption to our trade and to transportation.
No, we won't. How do you work that out?
Look, there's been analysis by the UK in A Changing Europe of the shape of this deal already, and the analysis shows that the impact to our public finances could be up to £49 billion a year, and that means less money for our schools, for our hospitals, for the police. This is damaging for the UK.
How will our transport be disrupted by this deal?
Look, we're still looking at customs borders here.
No, we're not.
Boris Johnson said that no Conservative government could countenance having a border down the Irish Sea, but that's exactly what he has put forward.
How will transport be affected by this deal?
There will still be disruption because because you'll still have lorries queuing up potentially.
How? I mean, this is ludicrous. I mean, you're deputy leader of the Liberal Democrats. Yeah. You ought to know that under this deal, there will be no disruption at Dover and Calais at all.
Well, I've spoken to colleagues in the European Parliament from other European countries who say that, yes, there will be disruption.
But how? You just accept their word, do you? You don't actually ask for the detail of how that would be?
Well, the point is, we may not feel the impact immediately.
No, the point is that you have indulged in scaremongering by trying to maintain that there will be transport disruption when you have no evidence for that whatsoever.
There is still going to be a border for Northern Ireland, even if it isn't on the island of Ireland. That is a form of disruption because you're taking us out of the customs union.
Well, Northern Ireland is staying in the customs union.
Well, yeah.
So why should there be any disruption to trade to Northern Ireland then?
Because you're removing the freedom of access that there is at the moment.
No, you're not. Because Northern Ireland is staying in the customs union, so that there is no...
A version of it, but the details haven't been worked out, and it's not clear.
They're staying in the single market and the customs union. I'm very surprised you don't know that.
They're not staying in the single market, actually.
Yes, they are, actually.
No, it's a version of the EU customs union, but Boris Johnson is calling it a UK customs union, so it's actually not clear what the ramifications of that would be.
Well, the ramifications are that Northern Ireland is effectively in both, so that when we make trade agreements with other countries, Northern Ireland will be included in them, which would not have been the case under Theresa May's deal.
Mm-hmm. But you can't be half in, half out, and this is the problem with this lack of clarity. I mean,
I suggest that after we finish this interview, you go and read the actual agreement, because you clearly haven't done so. Otherwise, you would have been able to answer these questions.
If we're going to go ahead with leaving, and that's the best that we've got on the table, then that's the best we've got on the table. When the music stops, if that's what we end up with as in terms of a deal, we should put that to the people and say, look, this is what the government's been able to cobble together. Do you want it or don't you want it? But to go for no deal would be, frankly, disastrous.
Well, then you make that argument. You make that argument in a referendum campaign.
No, I think that...
No, you won't make it because you know you'll lose it. That's the problem, isn't it?
No, I think I won't make it because I have a certain responsibility to our country, and I will not agree.
No, what you're saying, Emily, is that you know better than the 17.4 million people who voted to leave the EU, and that's why people are going to Nigel Farage, because they don't like politicians like you talking down to them.
I don't believe that 17.4 million people voted for no deal. I don't believe that at all.
Well, you'd find out in a referendum, wouldn't you?
I believe that people... If
you don't ask the question, you'll never know the answer.
Well, we had a referendum, and people and 52% of the population voted to leave, but 48% of the population voted to remain. And in trying to get a deal together, I think that it was only right for us to try to reflect that, which is that we leave, but we don't go far.
But we stay in by 48%.
But we don't go far, and that is how you try and keep the country together. Now that is the way in which we have been proceeding, and that is what we've been trying to achieve. But we haven't been in government, and so it has been very difficult for the Labour Party to be able to deliver in the way that we'd want to.
I want to show you a picture that I've just had just before we came on air, and it's of Nigel Farage being milkshaked. What's your comment on that?
Horrible and ridiculous, and people shouldn't do it.
Because
I can't stand this. I mean, I really feel very strongly about this. The guy's entitled to his point of view. I don't agree with them. I profoundly disagree with them. We've got to get out of this situation where if you disagree with someone, you can stop them speaking, you can disrupt their meetings, you can throw things over them. It's ridiculous.
do you admire Nigel Farage?
I think he's an effective communicator, so I admire that bit of him. But
Because he's been described as the most effective or influential British politician since you.
Okay, well, that will be, yeah.
Would you debate him one-on-one before Thursday?
I don't know about that.
Be quite something, though.
Yeah, well, it'll be interesting. We'll see. There may be another occasion at another time.
Borough from Wales. Barry, I got a question for you. You know, as a Labour supporter and a Labour voter for all of my life, for you to turn around to me and tell me you're going to get me back into the Labour Party by offering me a referendum on a choice between Remain Light and Remain, how stupid do you take us for? You take us for utter idiots, don't you, Barry?
Well, borrowed out to you too. But look, what we're looking at is
you're going against the vote that we voted for Barry.
No.
Come out and say it.
You remember what was on that ballot paper? It was whether we
leave
should
or remain.
Exactly.
Quite simple, Barry.
And what it didn't say is how we would leave. And what we've been struggling over the past 3 years, and what the Conservatives have been unable even to agree amongst themselves, so much so that they've thrown 21 of their own people out the party, right? Is how we should leave. How we should leave. Now, some people want to leave in the most right-wing way possible.
It's not right-wing.
Well, it's
so
just
you're
leaving.
telling me I'm right-wing, Barry? Are you telling me I'm right-wing?
No.
I voted Labour all my life, and I'm a right-wing person. This is why we in South Wales are going to give you a massive wake-up call on December the 12th. You are going to realise South Wales is like Scotland. You've took us for granted and you take us for fools.
Well, I've never taken anybody for granted. I've never taken any vote for granted. I think we must always try and listen to people's concerns and address them. But what the referendum decided was that people wanted to leave. What wasn't decided was how we should, and that's what Parliament's been arguing about.
But you're not going to offer a choice in this referendum, are you? You're going to offer, as James says, a choice between Remain and Remain Light.
No, it's not Remain Light.
Well, it is. You're staying in the single market. You're staying in the customs union.
If you don't have any representation in the European Union, if you're no longer bound by the two treaties of the European Union, that means you are not a member of the European Union, and that's what we voted on.
And
if you remember back to the referendum,
should you not offer a proper Brexit on the referendum as well?
May just make this point. If you remember back to the referendum, when Nigel Farage was saying, "Look at Norway, look at Switzerland."
Stop mentioning Nigel Farage and Hannah. They are not members of the government. They're not MPs. You are trying to go against what we voted for. Don't waffle, Barry. Come out and say it. You want us to remain, and you want to stab the people in South Wales in the back.
Absolutely
like you've done
not.
to Scotland, like you've done to the north.
No, absolutely not. What we're trying to do is to offer people a way in which, yes, they can leave if they want to, but without destroying jobs and our economy, and without ignoring the wishes of the other half of the population.
But you could easily satisfy James, I think, by saying we'll have a Leave versus Remain referendum. We'll rerun the first one, actually, so we can see how people's views have changed or not. And then if Remain win, well, we all know what that means. But then if Leave wins, then you have a secondary question. Deal or Labour's, no deal or Labour's deal. And then I think that would satisfy James.
No, sorry, at the time of the referendum, nobody ever talked about no deal.
Yes, they did.
No.
David Cameron did. He said, if we don't leave with a deal, we leave under WTO terms. I can play you the video.
Sorry, you're right. You're right. But what he was saying when he was saying that, and let's look at the implication of what he was saying. He was saying that would be disastrous. He said if we don't leave with the deal, we would. Yeah. That was simply the default position.
But people have a right to.
That was going off the cliff edge.
Anyway, I mean, James there has articulated Labour's problem in this election, not only in South Wales but in the Midlands and the North. And judging by that YouGov poll on Wednesday, I mean, that is where Boris Johnson would get his majority from.
Well, look, if you look at what's been happening in the polls have been narrowing over the past few weeks.
True.
They've narrowed greatly this last week, down in some polls down to 6 points. I hope they will halve again in the next week, and ultimately we will be in a position where we can win this election. But we'll do it by, Iain, by trying to answer your question straight, and I'm not trying to duck his question. I've taken it on board. I understand he disagrees with me, but what he has to understand is that he, in disagreeing with half of his fellow citizens, we're faced with two extremes. Some people want one, some people want the other.
Number one, Britain, they should mind their own business, Whatever's going on everywhere in the world, there is that a country's problem. You know what I mean? Is Brunei, Sultan Brunei, going to interfere with the UK's problem? No. So I can't understand why there's a big fuss about this.
So you don't think a country introducing laws to stone people is a good thing?
Why? Because people, they do not know what it says in the Quran. They're not. They haven't read it. They haven't said, like that hypocrite you had, the Labour MP. When he was saying, he's not
a hypocrite. He was giving his views.
You know why? Because I can answer his answer a question. When he said he doesn't say in the Quran. He does say, Surah Lot. I hope he's listening. Surah Lot, tell him to read it. One day the caravan came to do business before the Prophet Muhammad. What they do, women, they used to grab man, commit adultery with man. To be honest with you, I don't care what other people do, their own business, but they're not trying to infect it to other people.
Do you believe that people should be stoned for committing adultery or being gay?
Whatever says the Quran, I believe. Whatever says God says in it, I believe in it. It's not my law.
You believe in something that was written many, many hundreds of years ago.
Yeah, it cannot be changed until the day of judgment. Nothing will be changed. These hypocrites, they're trying to twist it around for their own benefit. That's it, black and white, simple as that. You cannot hide from the truth.
I don't know what to say to you, Hakeem. I just really don't know what to say because
I'm sorry, Iain. Look, due to respect,
do you think that I deserve to be stoned?
You don't have to be deserved. Look, whatever.
Oh, so you can do it even if it's not deserved. Where does it say that in the Quran?
What you do, zani wa zaniya. You know what that means? When someone commit adultery, they have to be whipped.
Well, I'd like to think I haven't committed adultery, but I have committed what you regard the sin of having gay sex. Do you think that I deserve to be stoned for that?
No, I cannot. It's not me who to judge.
Well, you clearly.
Not me who to judge.
Well, I mean,
can I ask you one single question, Iain? Can you imagine that small town, that small island, let's say Brunei? Yeah, if you let everything go to normal, yeah. Can you imagine next 20 or 50 years, there will be no children, no next generation?
Oh, my goodness.
Every woman having sex with women and men having sex with men.
People like you do exist.
No, there is plenty, thousands and millions. That's the truth.
Well,
even Christianity. Can I ask you a question? Why, for example, they try... We go back to sex education, yeah? And LGBT in schools. Why they try... demonize and brainwash children from an early age.
Nobody's brainwashing anybody.
No.
Nobody's brainwashing anybody. Nobody is suggesting... Hang on, if you ask me a question, let me actually answer it. Pin your ears back and you might actually learn something. Because what happens in primary schools, nobody learns about sex. They learn about... No, they do not.
If I send you some videos, you'll be shocked.
I don't think I want to see your videos, Hakeem. Thank you.
They're social media. You can check it yourself.
What they learn about is relationships, and they learn that some children... Listen to me, Hakeem, listen to me, because we're not going to get very far unless we have a conversation.
Okay.
That means that when I speak, you listen, and when you speak, I listen.
Okay.
what happens in relationships education is that children are taught that not everyone has a mummy and a daddy. Some people just have a mummy. Some people just have a daddy. Some kids have a daddy and a daddy, or a mummy and a mummy. And that is just reflecting the society that we live in nowadays. Now, you may not like that society. Hang on. You may not like that, but that is the way we do things in this country and the way things we do in the Western world. And therefore, that has to be addressed with children from all backgrounds, whether they're Christian, Jewish, Muslim, Buddhist, whatever. That to me is the way a normal society works, where everybody is respected.
That is fine. Can I ask you one single question? That is a brainwash. Nick Farage's show about last week. One Christian woman, 2 women call up. They were shocked. That's what they're teaching them at school. Listen, there is a lot of people talking about it. You know, they're trying to confuse people from an early age. She came home. She shaved her hair off.
Nobody's trying to confuse anybody.
You know, can I ask you? You're our the last generations, your fathers and our grandfathers, did they learn that in school? No. They grew up with it, you know, learn it from the society.
They didn't learn it in school. You're absolutely right, Hakeem. And that is why generation after generation grew up with bigoted feelings to people who weren't necessarily just like themselves. My parents' generation grew up thinking generally that gay people were somehow abnormal. They grew up thinking that gay people chose to be gay. They grew up thinking that gay people groomed other people towards their proclivities, none of which is true. And the point of relationship education, even at a young age now, is to try and explain that being gay is not a lifestyle choice. Do you seriously think that gay people choose to have a more difficult life? Because, let's face it, that's what happens to most gay people. My life would have been incredibly easier if I hadn't been gay. People don't choose it. You are born it. Now, you're not going to agree with me. I know that, because you have a very closed mind. You're not willing to accept any of this, and you think people should be punished just because of the way that they're born. I would beg to differ. The exit poll is showing the Conservatives on 368 seats, Labour on 191, the Liberal Democrats on 13, the SNP on a massive 55. That is a Conservative majority predicted by the exit poll, a big Conservative majority. Terrible result for the Labour Party if that is actually the result that we see at the end of the evening. Now, with exit polls, we must always caution basically, shouldn't we? Yeah. Because they have been wrong before. I remember 1992, which got the result completely wrong. But it would be a massive 86 majority, which is way above what anybody has projected in this election campaign. The whole day, the whole of Westminster has been agog, thinking that we're heading for hung Parliament territory. This is not hung Parliament territory, and if it results in a hung Parliament, the pollsters have got a lot of egg on their faces. Sheila.
And if this is correct, or even nearly correct, it means that Boris Johnson can, quote, get Brexit done. We can talk more about what that means later on. We've got 8 hours to do so. We do have to, and we very much will. But if this is even remotely close to the result, then Boris Johnson has achieved what he set out to achieve. He focused on Brexit and the NHS, pretty much that's all, in terms of his major messages. And that is what he wanted. He wanted what Theresa May wanted. He wanted that larger majority to have a free hand to do what he wanted on Brexit.
And this completely gives him that majority, again using the caveat that if it is true. One of my Remain supporting listeners, Simon, has just tweeted me, lots of us, including me, have already had literature from the Brexit Party personally addressed too. So again, they seem to have stolen the march on you.
We'll be interesting to see what huge amounts of funding Mr Farage has had from various dubious sources.
Well, that is an outrageous allegation to make when you have no proof of that whatsoever, in that all of their money so far, apart from, as he told me the other week, a £200,000 donation from one person, which will be declared. What evidence have you got that he's had funding from dubious sources?
Let's look at the past of what happened with the Vote Leave campaign and some of the
he wasn't part of the Vote Leave campaign, as you well know.
And there are going to be, obviously, all the election campaigns will be revealing their sources of income. But we
would you like to withdraw that allegation?
I haven't made.
Given that you haven't got any substance to it at all.
I haven't made any specific allegation.
Yes, you have. You just said that he was receiving money from dubious sources, yet you have no proof of that whatsoever.
I think we need to all be transparent about our sources of income and where we're getting it from, and we will all be judged when the figures are published. But no doubt the important thing here is some organisations are much better funded than others, and those who are new parties obviously have to start very, very
well. He's had 90,000 donations of £25. How many have you had?
I don't know. I honestly can't tell you how many donations we've had. I know we've had lots of small donations from people, and our whole campaign is being funded by the money that is donated by people who believe that we need to remain in the European Union.
So you're being funded in exactly the same way as him, then?
I don't think so. I don't know how he's being funded.
Well, I just told you. 90,000 donations of £25 each.
Well, as I said, we are fighting this as a grassroots campaign. We don't have big funders. We are not like the big parties with their resources, and we are going to make sure that the voices of the majority of people in this country who want sensible politics rather than the extremists will do well in these European elections.
I tell you what, you said I'm allowed to talk about anything, right?
You can.
This radio station is the most Toryest radio station I've ever heard in my life.
We just had Barry Gardiner on for 45
I am a
minutes.
Labour supporter, right? I've been a Labour supporter all my life, and all I get on this radio station is, Jeremy Corbyn, he's going to ruin the country, Boris Johnson lied through his back teeth. I watched that interview this morning, and I tell you what it is. Iain, when you go home, you listen to that.
I'm going to watch it. I am going to watch it.
You listen to that interview, mate, and I tell you what, he's the biggest liar on 2 feet, right, that Boris Johnson made. He is an absolute disgrace to this country. And if we put him back into power, God help this country, mind. God help this country.
Now, Sean,
I am sick to the back teeth of all these Tory idiots that turn around and say, Tories are going to do fantastic for this country. They are an absolute disgrace, these Tories, and they always have been. They don't give a damn about the North East. They don't give a damn about what happens up here. All they're bothered about is, I was mayor for London. I done well for London. He's done nothing for the North East. The Tories have done nothing for the North East, and never will do. They're an absolute shambles.
Can I get a word in?
Sorry, mate. I better get that off.
I can tell you feel very passionately. But
Iain, mate, I'm absolutely sick. All you get is, we've got to get Brexit done, man. Brexit is ruining this country, man. It's ruining this country.
If you were watching Boris Johnson and Andrew Marr, you won't have heard the fact that I spent 45 minutes in the company of Labour's Barry Gardiner at the beginning of the programme. So I'm not quite sure.
Did he lie?
No.
Did he lie?
Well, I mean, people can judge for themselves whether he was... actually, I thought he was very honest in a lot of what he said, because
he was. He did. I listened to it.
Excellent. Well, how can you accuse us of not giving Labour a fair chance when we had him on for 45 minutes?
You get these callers on that come on and rip Jeremy Corbyn to bits, right?
Are we supposed to censor them?
It's like the Tory party, right? You've got to give them a chance. Right?
I'm giving you a chance.
Give Labour a chance.
I'm giving you a chance.
No, I'm saying you've got to give Labour a chance.
Well, let me let you into... Well, it's not a little secret because I've written about it. But last week, on Tuesday evening, we were supposed to have spent an hour...
Sorry for shouting.
No, don't worry. Look, I enjoy your calls, Sean. I always do. We were supposed to have had Emily Thornberry on for an hour last Tuesday evening, because we do these long-form interviews, which very few other people in the media do, on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and we book people in advance to make sure that there's no last-minute hitches. But she was pulled by the Labour Party on Sunday. They promised to provide somebody else, and they didn't. So we couldn't interview a Labour politician, even though we had it in the schedule. Now, I take issues of balance seriously in an election campaign, partly because legally we have to provide the same amount of coverage to the Labour Party as we provide for the Conservative Party. But if that party, I mean, I could tell you the traumas that we went through getting Barry Gardiner on this morning, and he was very good, and I'm really grateful to him for coming on. But it's like getting blood out of a stone, Sean, sometimes.
But at the end of the day, Ian, I listened to that interview this morning, right? He lied through his back teeth about saying, I'm going to build 40 hospitals, right? At the beginning, it was 6 revamps and 40 hospitals. Now it's 40 hospitals and 20 revamps. You cannot trust the bloke, like. The man is going off it, like. Yeah. I'm going off it. I wish I was a Labour Party. I would get into power straight away. But I tell you what it is. I am sick to the back teeth of these Tory people that have been, like, they sit down and they get... They're absolutely... I'm sorry, but they're all half-wits, like. Tory voters are all half-wits.
Oh, come on.
And always will be.
Come on.
They are, man.
You can't call 14 million people half-wits.
The Tories ruined the North East. They knew that they ruined the North East. I've never forgiven them what they did to me when I left school when I was in 1981, where they put us on £1 an hour. I've never forgot them days. Right? They had me cleaning sewers for £1 an hour. That's what Tories did for you in the 1980s.
But you can't...
And I fell in the sewer. And I had to go home. And I was Dr. Day's paper because I went home.
Well,
that's what kind of Tories you're dealing with, man.
I was paid 10 pence an hour for mucking the pigs out on my dad's farm.
Oh, well, that's your father to blame for that, not the government.
And I used to fall in the pig muck all the time.
Oh, well, that was your father that paid you £10 an hour, not the government.
And he was a Liberal supporter.
Oh, well, there you go then. But at the end of the day, mate, I am absolutely fed up with these Tories that are saying, oh, we do good for this country. You do. Thatcher was the most evilest woman in the world, man. And she always will be up in the North East.
She's my absolute heroine of all time, Sean.
Heroine?
Yep.
I think you're on heroin. Right, I'll see you later.
See you later. Sean, thank you very much. Sean is now my favourite caller of all time on LBC, and I want him to call in more regularly.
After these announcements, after this major speech in the Tory Party Congress, I am afraid that one has to expect that it's not a very serious proposal and that it does not correspond to any of the requirements that the EU has set already in the withdrawal agreement on the backstop to protect the internal market and customs union. So I'm afraid that we have to be seriously prepared for a disorderly exit of the UK from the EU, which could happen at the end of the month or a bit later. But I think I regret, but this is a little bit the feeling that I get from what has happened today.
Have you read the letter to Jean-Claude Juncker?
No, I haven't read the letter, but I'm more or less aware of his proposal on how to organise the border. And I mean, I can only refer to what the reactions from Brussels have been.
Well,
so
can I
say that
I mean, with
a serious proposal.
With respect, can I suggest that you actually read the letter that he's written to Jean-Claude Juncker, because it does contain detailed proposals as to how the border would work. It protects the integrity of the single market, and it comes up with proposals for new customs arrangements. Now, if the European Union is seriously going to say that that is not a basis for negotiation, then we might as well all give up and go home.
If it's based on this idea that there would be customs checked at manufacturing sites, sort of in the vicinity, but not at the border. So I think it's a very unusual proposal.
It's not. No. It's not unusual at all, because that happens at ports all over Europe. In Rotterdam, a lot of the customs checks are conducted 5 miles away from the port of Rotterdam.
I still believe that this doesn't correspond any to the requirements to keep the border between the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland open.
Well, I'm afraid you're falling
view,
for Mr. Verhofstadt's propaganda, because it absolutely does that.
No, I haven't even heard from his reactions yet. But the only thing I can say that I'm not even sure that Boris Johnson wants a deal. I think he's being so openly saying that whatever happens, the exit day stays. So I think we'd better start to prepare for that no deal.
Well, it doesn't sound to me that you particularly want a deal either.
Well, what I would like to see is that he respects the House of Commons and the Parliament, which he hasn't done particularly lately. And I obviously hope that there will be a second chance for the UK people to have their say on the situation now. In the second
why can't you respect democracy and respect the fact that the majority of British people voted to leave the European Union, and 3.5 years later, because of the intransigence of people like you in the European Union, it hasn't come to pass?
You're very challenging, and I respect
Well, I am
that.
challenging, partly because you haven't actually read the letter from Boris Johnson. I think if you read the letter, you might have a different understanding of it.
I saw his speech. But anyway, so I'm afraid that we have a different idea of democracy. That,
clearly.
To go back to 3.5 years to this so-called referendum. I mean, it was a
so-called
very
referendum.
open-ended.
Oh, seriously? You call it a so-called referendum? But you'd like to have another one, would you?
Yeah, yes, and because I'm a proponent of the Swiss model of direct democracy, which means that alternatives are very well grounded on what are the consequences of each of the options, and we cannot even with the best will say that the voting in 2016 matches those requirements.
No, I think we can. I think, again, with respect, I lived through that referendum. You did not. I know exactly how that debate was conducted. Most people got more information about the pros and cons of that than any other election or referendum in UK history. I really would suggest that you go and read Boris Johnson's letter. Heidi, thank you. What measures should we take as a society? And I don't just mean government here. I mean, we've got to change attitudes in society. How do we do that in ways that we haven't done before? Kahinde Andrews.
Well, I think one thing I'd say is that, as I was saying before, the big change is that the only real change is that there is a kind of an emerging middle class, and some of us have got platforms. And I think those of us who have platforms need to be far more responsible about how we talk about race and the issues, because a lot of the stuff that comes out of some people's mouth really does promote this kind of right-wing view, which makes it terribly, terribly worse, right? So I think that's one thing. On the second side of this, and I am saying the problem of racism is in the DNA of this system. It is not going to get better or worse if we keep going to Theresa May and the government and ask them to fix it. That does not mean we cannot do anything. That means that we have to take it upon ourselves, as we have always done. Actually, there's a big, big, big history of black activism, community activism, and solve these problems, because these are problems like black children dying on the streets. That is a problem we need to fix. But we fix that by building ourselves.
Do you not see any signs of progress? I mean, in politics, for example, you have leafy conservative constituencies in East Anglia and the southeast of England that have no issue at all in picking black candidates to stand in safe Conservative seats. That would not have happened 15 years ago. That's got to be a good thing.
Why is that a good thing? A black Tory is a Tory. I mean, you could have 100 black Tories. This is making no difference to me.
You see, you are exhibiting the problem here by saying that.
No, I'm the problem.
You absolutely are the problem, because if you don't think that is progress, I'm afraid you're living in a different world to the rest of us.
You really want me to accept that the fact that we have black Conservative MPs is progress? Look at the Tory party policies. Look at the policies they pursue. Those are the policies. Those are the policies that make it worse for black people in this country. I don't care if it's black people or Asian people or green people.
So you think they're all coconuts, do you?
That is not a word that I would particularly necessarily use. But my point is
that's what you think, though, isn't it?
It's certainly not black activists. Let's put it that way. I just say.
So you can only be a good black activist if you're on the left.
If you're not a Tory, there's no place for Tories in black activism. But I say that every day of the week.
I mean, does that annoy you as it does me? Not to actually address the argument rather than conduct these ridiculous stunts that are just are so pathetic. I cannot understand why you think that they'll get anybody on your side, let alone Jeremy Corbyn. But I can't imagine many ordinary Labour voters are going to think, oh yeah, they've changed themselves to Jeremy Corbyn's house. Yeah, we'll support them. It's ridiculous.
Well, they got me onto your show, Nick. So that's a start.
It's actually Iain.
Going beyond that, I would say that actually, here's an interesting fact. Quite a lot of politicians want us to do this. We've actually had back-channel communication from politicians in more than one party saying, pile the pressure on us. We need to be told more strongly and shown more strongly that the action urgently, desperately needs to be taken on this, because that's the situation that we're in, Iain. If we don't take action on this soon, it will be too late. The UN have warned that very, very clearly. And we're sorry to be having to take these quite strong measures. We're sorry it's come to this. But you know what? It has come to this. We need to do it now, or it is going to be too late.
Well, we've heard this for many, many years. I can remember hearing back in 2005, sort of 10 years to save the planet, and now it's 2019.
Yes, the warnings have just escalated drastically. If you've been looking at what the UN and the IPCC have been saying, they're now saying, for example, the UN Secretary General said, we have 18 months to make a serious start on changing the whole way we organise our economy. Otherwise, civilization as you know it is likely to come to an end.
Rupert, you know
that's the UN Secretary General, it's not me.
You are an academic, you know a lot about these issues, but you know as well as I do that it is not possible to reduce our carbon to zero by 2025, which, as I understand it, is one of the main claims from Extinction Rebellion. The only way you could do that would be to ban all cars, all air travel, and kill all the cows.
Actually, it's not quite as bad as that. But you're right, Iain. The changes that are needed are drastic. It's not going to be enough to switch to electric cars, for example. It's not going to be enough to take a few less flights. We need to take a lot less flights. We need to have a lot less cars on the road. We need to eat a lot less meat. We need to make transformational changes. Nothing less will do at this point.
But you can't take the population with you within 6 years on that, can you?
Well, we're making a start, and we're getting a hell of a lot of support. I was on Waterloo Bridge this afternoon, which has been turned in effect into a sort of pedestrianised and cycle-friendly zone, and also into the real garden bridge, as I like to call it. It's got plants all over it now. And the atmosphere there is fantastic, and loads of ordinary passers-by, loads of citizens supporting us. I then took a taxi to get to the meeting I've just been in now, and the taxi driver was hugely supportive.
Well, I hope it was an electric taxi.
Behind you.
I hope it was an electric taxi. Otherwise, why didn't you use the tube?
Well, because I was in a terrible rush, and I'm a human being like anybody else.
Oh, I see. Well, don't you feel that's slightly hypocritical?
No, I don't, Iain. What I think is that what people
I think
need
everybody
to
listening to this interview will.
No, look, you're going to say something like, yes, you ought to live in a cave because, you're not allowed to burn in carbon.
No, you want us to live in caves. That's the problem. You want to deindustrialise the economy, so we go back to the 1830s.
You know what I want, Iain? I want us to be able to survive. I want us to be able to give our children a world in which they can survive and flourish. And it is as drastic as that. We need to be absolutely clear that time lags because of dangerous climate change. The time lags in the system mean that even if we stopped all carbon emissions tomorrow, the climate would go on deteriorating for another generation. Now, we're not calling for that. We're calling for drastic changes, drastic reductions as soon as possible. It's not about going back to the Stone Age. It is about major, major changes. We've got to get our heads around that. If we just tinker around at the edges, then this civilization is going down. It is not going to make it. We're not going to bequeath a world that is livable to our children, and that would be the worst crime imaginable.
I mean, look, I know it's awful in the cold light of day, but I was just trying to feed him some bit of nonsense because I just thought his questions were off the wall, and I was just trying to think of something. He was obviously playing me, but I thought to myself, Greg, have you gone? You've gone like. What's happened to you, Greg? And I was just trying to give him a sort of line to sort of shut him up on it, because I just thought he was being bizarre.
When we were on Politics Live earlier today, you said, well, look, this was just joshing. It was all banter. Yeah. But having listened to that and having looked at the whole transcript, it doesn't strike me as the kind of banter that you kind of think trying to say it was, because a lot of the things that you're saying here are actually true, aren't they?
Well, it's not banter in as much as there's a sort of cut and thrust, but I'm trying to sort of make him, because I know he's a very active in the Canterbury constituency, terribly complacent about the election. I'm trying to sort of misdirect him, which, Well,
you said he's complacent a moment ago. You said he said that you didn't think the Conservatives would win.
Well, no, but I'm trying to maintain his complacency, if you like, and.
Is that what friends do to each other?
Well, you do in election campaigns, because there's a bit of there's a bit of sort of rivalry in these things, and it's a bit like behind when your team is in the FA Cup final, or is a few points away from winning the Premier League, and you sort of play these sort of silly games with who you think are your mates from other teams. And by the way, talking about the state of play at that point in the campaign, it was an issue in the YouGov poll. I think that had come out by that point. And I'm always a pessimist. I am always a pessimist. I remember when Leicester were playing Tottenham, the game they had to beat Tottenham to win the Premier League in 2016, and I was convinced that Leicester were going to lose because I'm such a pessimist. So I'm always a pessimist.
Being a West Ham fan.
And by the way, you go around every candidate, Tory or Labour, they might come on your show and say, "Oh, we're going to win," but every candidate goes into that count thinking they're going to lose. That's what happens.
Yeah, well, I thought I was going to lose, and I did.